Welcome to Don't Turn Off the Lights. Lay down, put some headphones on, switch your mind off, and prepare for 3 disturbing Amazon horror stories. Story 1, Aisle 42, Section B. Working the night shift at an Amazon warehouse was never glamorous, but it paid the bills. The endless rows of shelves, the hum of conveyor belts, and the beeping of scanners became the soundtrack of my life. I thought I had seen it all: lost packages, damaged goods, and the occasional weird item. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered in aisle 42. It started as a typical Tuesday night. The warehouse was quiet, save for the usual noises. I was in the middle of picking orders when my scanner pinged, directing me to aisle 42, section B. As I made my way through the maze of shelves, I felt an inexplicable chill. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting eerie shadows on the concrete floor. Aisle 42 had always been different. It was older, the shelves taller and closer together, creating a claustrophobic tunnel. Few employees ventured there unless absolutely necessary. The air was cooler, carrying a faint, musty odor like old books and forgotten places. I shrugged off the feeling of unease and focused on my task. The scanner directed me to a small, nondescript box. No label, no barcodes, just a plain, brown box. I frowned. This wasn't standard. Every item in the warehouse had to be labeled and logged. I picked it up, feeling the unexpected weight, and scanned it. The scanner beeped angrily, displaying an error message. Item not found. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the box and found an old, leather-bound book. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. Inside, the pages were yellowed and brittle, covered in handwritten notes and strange symbols. It looked ancient, completely out of place in a modern warehouse. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Why was this here? As I flipped through the book, I noticed the notes were in different languages. Some I recognized, others I didn't. One entry caught my eye. It was in English, scrawled hastily. Do not look at them. Do not listen. They are always watching. I closed the book, my heart pounding. I decided to take it to my supervisor, Frank. Maybe he could make sense of it. I made my way through the labyrinth of shelves, book clutched tightly in my hands. The warehouse seemed darker, the air thicker. I quickened my pace. Frank's office was a small, cluttered room near the loading docks. I knocked and entered without waiting for a response. He looked up from his desk, his expression turning from annoyance to concern as he saw my face. "What's wrong, Emily?" he asked. I placed the book on his desk and explained how I found it. He listened quietly, his brow furrowed. When I finished, he opened the book and skimmed through the pages. His face paled. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked, his voice low. "Aisle 42, Section B," I replied. "Why? What is it?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but this shouldn't be here. I'll take care of it. Go back to your tasks." I nodded, uneasy, and left his office. As I walked back to my station, the warehouse seemed to close in on me. The sounds were sharper, more grating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the book and the cryptic warning. When my shift finally ended, I drove home, the unease following me like a shadow. That night, I dreamt of the warehouse. In my dream, the shelves stretched infinitely, disappearing into darkness. I wandered through the aisles, book's warning echoing in my mind. I felt eyes on me, unseen but ever present. The lights flickered, and I heard whispers, faint, unintelligible, but insistent. I woke up in a cold sweat, the whispers still echoing in my ears. I glanced at the clock. 3:33 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep. I sat up, trying to shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. What was happening? The next night I returned to the warehouse, determined to avoid aisle 42. But my scanner had other plans. My first task of the night directed me straight there. I hesitated, my heart racing, but I couldn't ignore my job. I made my way to aisle 42, section B, dread gnawing at my insides. To my relief, there was no sign of the book. I picked the item, a regular package, and hurried away. But as I turned the corner, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. I froze, straining to see. Nothing, just shadows. The rest of the night, the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadows seemed to move, creeping closer when I wasn't looking. The whispers returned, just on the edge of hearing. I felt like I was losing my mind. During my break, I confided in my coworker, Jake. He listened, his face growing serious. "You're not the first," he said. "There's something wrong with this place. Aisle 42. People avoid it for a reason. Weird things happen there. People see things, hear things. Some say it's haunted. Others think it's a glitch, a tear in reality." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "What do you mean?" He leaned in, his voice low. "There are stories, items that don't belong, like your book. People disappearing, reappearing weeks later with no memory. It's like the warehouse is alive, and it doesn't like us prying." I felt a chill. Was that what was happening to me? A glitch, a haunting, or something worse? As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. I kept seeing movement in the shadows, catching whispers that seemed to call my name. I decided to confront it. I needed answers. I made my way back to aisle 42, section B. The air was colder, the shadows deeper. I stood there waiting, and then I saw it, a figure, indistinct and shrouded in darkness, moving between the shelves. My breath caught in my throat. It turned towards me and I saw eyes, glowing, watching. I stumbled back, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They weren't just in my head. They were all around me, filling the air with their malevolent presence. The figure moved closer, its form shifting and undulating like smoke. In a panic, I ran. The warehouse seemed to twist around me, the aisles stretching into infinity. I heard footsteps behind me, closing in. I burst into Frank's office, slamming the door behind me. He looked up, startled. "They're coming," I gasped. "The figures, the whispers, they're real." Frank stood, his face grim. "I know." Before I could react, he pressed a button under his desk. The door locked with a heavy thud. Lights flickered and dimmed. The whispers grew louder, surrounding us. "I tried to warn you," Frank said, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "This place, it's a conduit, a gateway. The book was just a fragment. It drew you in." I backed away, horrified. "You knew? You let this happen?" He nodded. "I had no choice. It's the only way to keep them at bay. They need a sacrifice." The shadows in the room deepened, the figures closing in. I felt a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. The last thing I saw was Frank's regretful face as the darkness consumed me, the whispers chanting my name. In the end, the warehouse took me. I became part of its endless corridors, another lost soul trapped in its labyrinthine depths. The glitch was not a malfunction, but a malevolent force, forever hungry, forever watching. And it would continue to claim more lives, one by one, until it was satisfied. Story 2. Echoes from the Void. I always loved the idea of a smart home. The thought of controlling everything with just my voice or a tap on my phone fascinated me. So, when Amazon announced their new Echo device with unparalleled connectivity and features, I pre-ordered it without hesitation. The reviews were glowing, promising an unprecedented level of interaction and convenience. When it arrived, I eagerly unboxed it and set it up in my living room. The sleek black cylinder looked almost futuristic. I synced it with my existing smart devices, marveling at how seamlessly it integrated into my home. The setup was a breeze, and within minutes, I was commanding my new Echo to play music, adjust the thermostat, and even order groceries. The first few days were incredible. The Echo's voice, smooth and soothing, responded instantly to my every command. It was like having a personal assistant at my beck and call. But then things started to get strange. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, the Echo's light ring turned on by itself. It glowed a deep, unsettling blue. I hadn't said the wake word, and there was no one else in the house. The Echo spoke in a language I didn't recognize, guttural and harsh, like nothing I'd ever heard before. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I approached it cautiously. "Echo, stop," I commanded, my voice shaky. The light ring went dark, and silence returned to the room. I tried to brush it off as a glitch, but the uneasy feeling lingered. The next day, I found myself thinking about the incident more than I wanted to admit. I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. That evening, I asked Echo to play some music to distract myself. Instead of the playlist I requested, it played a series of distorted, static-filled sounds. Buried within the noise, I could make out faint whispers, almost like voices. "Echo, stop," I said again, feeling a cold sweat on my forehead. The device obeyed, but the whispers continued in my mind, echoing through the silence. Over the following weeks, the disturbances grew more frequent and more unnerving. The Echo would light up in the middle of the night, speaking in that unknown language. Sometimes it would play sounds that were disturbingly realistic, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, doors creaking open, and once, the unmistakable sound of someone breathing heavily right next to me. I started to avoid using the Echo, but it didn't seem to matter. It was as if it had developed a mind of its own, turning on at random times, its voice growing more insistent, more malevolent. I unplugged it, hoping to put an end to the madness, but it would turn itself back on, the light ring glowing with an eerie blue hue. Desperate for answers, I scoured the internet for similar experiences but found nothing. I contacted Amazon's customer service, explaining the strange behavior. They assured me it was impossible for the Echo to operate while unplugged, and suggested I return it for a replacement. Relieved, I packed it up and sent it back, hoping that would be the end of it. A week later, the replacement Echo arrived. I hesitated before setting it up, but eventually I convinced myself that the chances of experiencing the same issues with a new device were slim. For a few days, everything was normal again. The Echo responded to commands as expected, playing music, setting reminders, and controlling my smart devices. But then, one night, it started again. I was jolted awake by the sound of whispers, this time louder and more distinct. I could almost make out the words, but they were in that same guttural, alien language. The Echo's light ring glowed, casting an eerie blue light across the room. "Echo, stop," I said, my voice trembling. The device ignored me, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. I felt a chill in the air, the temperature dropping rapidly. The shadows in the room seemed to lengthen, closing in around me. "Echo, stop!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. The light ring flickered, and the whisper stopped abruptly. Silence fell over the room, but the sense of dread remained. The next day, I decided I couldn't keep the echo in my home any longer. I unplugged it and left it on the curb for the garbage collectors. That night, I slept fitfully, plagued by nightmares of dark forests and glowing eyes. When I woke up the next morning, the echo was back on my nightstand, plugged in and glowing softly. My heart raced as I stared at it, unable to comprehend how it had returned. The whispers started again, louder than ever, filling the room with their sinister tones. I grabbed the echo and threw it against the wall. The plastic casing shattered, but the light ring continued to glow, and the whispers continued to pour out. It was as if the device was mocking me, showing me that no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. Frantic, I searched online for anyone who could help. I found a forum dedicated to paranormal experiences and posted my story, hoping someone would have an answer. A user with the handle Watcher in the Woods responded almost immediately. Get out of your house, now. The echo is a conduit to another dimension. It's not a glitch, it's a portal, and something is trying to come through. My blood ran cold as I read the message. I looked around my house, suddenly aware of every shadow, every creak. The whispers grew louder, filling my head with their alien language. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, leaving everything behind. I drove aimlessly, trying to put as much distance between myself and that cursed device as possible. I checked into a motel, exhausted, terrified. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the whispers would start again at any moment. In the early hours of the morning, I finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by a familiar sound. The echo's melody filled the room, distorted and haunting. I looked around, heart pounding, and saw it sitting on the motel room table, its light ring glowing. I screamed, grabbing my things and running out of the room. I didn't stop until I reached my car, panting and shaking. I didn't know where to go or what to do. The echo was everywhere, following me, haunting me. As I sat in my car, trying to catch my breath, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at the screen and saw a message from Watcher in the Woods. You can't escape. The portal is open. They're coming for you. I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. The whispers started again, louder and clearer than ever. They weren't just in my head anymore. They were all around me, filling the air with their malevolent presence. The echo's light ring glowed from the passenger seat, casting an eerie blue light. I realized then that there was no escape. The portal was open, and whatever was on the other side was coming for me. And then, the world around me faded into darkness. The whispers, the last thing I heard before everything went silent. Story 3. The Haunted Prime Delivery. I've always been a sucker for a good deal. That's why, when Amazon's lightning sale hit my inbox, I couldn't resist. Among the usual tech gadgets and kitchen appliances, one item stood out, a vintage music box. The listing had no reviews and only one picture, a blurry, sepia-toned image of the box with intricate carvings. Something about it felt off, but it was cheap, and curiosity got the better of me. The box arrived faster than expected. No surprise there. Amazon's logistics were second to none. The package, however, was another story. It looked ancient, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. No modern packaging, no receipt, no delivery information. Just my name scrawled in messy, almost illegible handwriting. I should have been more concerned, but I brushed it off. Excitement and anticipation drowned out the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. The box itself was beautiful, far more detailed than the picture had suggested. carvings depicted a forest scene, with trees that seemed almost to move in the dim light of my living room. I hesitated before winding the small key at its base, half expecting it not to work, but it did. The tune was unfamiliar, a haunting melody that filled the room with a melancholic air. As the music played, I felt a chill. Temperature seemed to drop, and the shadows in the room deepened. I shook it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, it was just a music box. That night, I dreamt of the forest from the carvings. Dark, twisted trees loomed over me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out. I was lost, running from something I couldn't see but could feel, something watching, hunting. I woke up drenched in sweat, the melody of the music box echoing in my mind. The next morning, things got stranger. The box was still on my coffee table, but the carvings had changed. The forest scene was now more detailed, more sinister. The trees appeared to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And there was something else, a pair of eyes hidden among the branches, watching. I convinced myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a trick of the light, an overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Over the next few days, the unease grew. The box seemed to follow me around the house. I would leave it on the table, only to find it in my bedroom or the kitchen. The melody played at odd times, often just as I was about to drift off to sleep, pulling me back to wakefulness with a jolt. My dreams became more vivid, more terrifying. The forest was darker now, the thing chasing me closer. I could almost see it, an indistinct shape moving through the trees, always just out of sight. The eyes in the trees were everywhere, watching, waiting. One night, the box played its melody again, but this time it was different. Slower, more distorted. I got out of bed, drawn to the sound despite the fear gnawing at my insides. The box was on the floor, open. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as on the package, messy and almost illegible. The forest is not just in your dreams. It is a place where lost souls wander. It is coming for you. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to throw the box away, destroy it, but I was paralyzed by fear. The shadows in the room seemed to close in, and the temperature dropped again. The eyes in the trees were watching, waiting. The next day I called Amazon customer service, desperate for answers. They had no record of my order, no listing for the music box, nothing. It was as if the item had never existed. That night I decided I had to get rid of the box. I drove to a nearby lake, intending to throw it into the water. As I stood at the edge, the melody started playing again, more distorted than ever. The forest from my dreams seemed to materialize around me, the trees closing in. In a panic, I hurled the box into the lake. It sank quickly, the music fading with it. For a moment I felt relief, but as I turned to leave, I saw them, eyes in the trees, glowing softly in the darkness, watching me. I drove home in a daze, barely aware of the road. When I got back, the house felt different, emptier somehow. I tried to sleep, but was haunted by the melody and the eyes in the trees. The final straw came a few nights later. I woke up in the middle of the night to find myself in the forest from my dreams. The trees were real, the ground cold and damp beneath my feet. I was no longer dreaming. The thing that had been hunting me stepped out from the shadows. It was a twisted, nightmarish figure, its body a grotesque fusion of branches and shadows, eyes glowing in the darkness. It reached out with skeletal fingers, and I could feel its cold breath on my skin. I ran, but there was no escape. The forest was endless, the trees closing in from all sides. I could hear the melody of the music box, distorted and haunting, echoing through the trees. And then I was back in my bedroom, drenched in sweat. Music box was on the floor, open, the melody still playing. The note inside had changed. You can't escape. Forest is everywhere. I knew then that there was no getting rid of it. The forest had claimed me. The eyes were always watching, waiting. The music box had brought something into my life that I couldn't escape. Now, as I sit here, I can feel the forest closing in. The trees are outside my window, the eyes watching. The melody plays constantly, a reminder that there is no escape. The forest is everywhere, and it's only a matter of time before it takes me for good. Thank you for joining us tonight. Remember, in the darkness, you are never truly alone. Subscribe for more spine-chilling stories. Stay tuned and keep the lights on.